What's good, y'all? It's your boy Havoc, final round. Hope y'all had a happy Thanksgiving. I wish you and your families a blessed holidays moving forward to the New Year's. But let's get into it. We got George Ferocious Kambosos versus Teófimo to take over López. It's gonna be a banger. But I'm gonna do a quick breakdown, prediction, summarize this as best as I can. I have a lot to say about both fighters, but I'll probably say most of that stuff in the post-fight video. But let's get to it. I think the telltale story of this fight is going to be the lack of a jab from Kambosos. Now, it's not because he doesn't have a jab. Kambosos does have a jab. He just doesn't utilize it. And I think a lot of it is because it's a stylistic or a strategic thing he's doing. He loves the counter punch. He's a very patient counter puncher. A lot of people label him a pressure fighter. I don't necessarily understand why. I don't see him in that category of a Julio Cesar Chavez or a Virgil Ortiz or a Triple G in terms of current examples. I'm not trying to compare him to those guys. I'm just saying when I think of a pressure fighter, I think of guys like that who are cutting off the ring relentlessly and they're constantly in their opponent's face. They're very proactive. I don't see that from Kambosos. If anything, you're gonna label him, I'll call him an aggressive counter puncher. That's about it. But he tends to be very patient. And don't get me wrong, I think he has a lot of potential. Kambosos, I've heard a lot about him. He used to train at the Wildcard Boxing Gym, put in a lot of rounds of sparring with Manny Pacquiao. I mean, that's some good experience right there. But once again, when I look at Kambosos, there's always like a question mark in my head. There's lots of confusion when I watch him stylistically and mechanically. It just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. It's like a math equation that has one wrong number in it and it just doesn't equal out. That's how I feel when I watch Kambosos, but he has a lot of potential. I feel that is not being fulfilled, and I'm going to point my finger at the trainer. I'm not saying his trainer is bad. I don't know who his trainer is. I'm just going out on a limb making this guess. He probably has an Aussie trainer, okay, because he's from Australia. And we all know Australia is probably not the biggest hub for creating the best boxing champions in the world. I could be wrong, but at the same time, I don't know much about Australian fighters for a reason. But I wouldn't compare Australia to the United States, Mexico, the UK, or even Ukraine for that matter, in terms of creating great boxers. I'm sure they have some good ones throughout history, but I wouldn't call it a fight hub. And maybe different with UFC and MMA, but in terms of boxing, I don't know about that. But I think because of that, you're seeing a guy who he's not really developing in a way to where he's gonna fulfill all the potential I see, because he's not bad, you guys. He's got some decent footwork. He has some mechanical flaws. He does a lot of cross-stepping with his rear leg, but he does that intentionally. You know, he has good speed. He's got some good pop on his punch. He throws punches and bunches when he counters. Got solid defense. I mean, he's at a high level for a reason. But I think he could be even better if he had an American trainer in his corner. Now, I don't blame him for sticking with his day one. I guarantee you if he does have an Aussie trainer, it's probably somebody he spent a lot of time with. I'm not saying he needs to boot him out, but he should be bringing in an American trainer to really direct him, because when I watch him stylistically and mechanically, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of that has to do with the lack of rich boxing tradition in Australia. So he's kind of, you know, it almost looks nonsensical, because he's like this counter puncher, but he fights in this Philly shell, right? He fights at a hard angle. He's not really cutting off the ring. He wants to be aggressive, but he's not really utilizing his jab. It doesn't add up to me. And I'm cool with that. Sometimes not utilizing your jab for certain specific fights can be very advantageous. Okay, it can be very effective, because sometimes you don't give your opponent anything to counter, especially when you're going up against another counter puncher. And if you don't give them your jab, sometimes you can make it difficult for them to kind of key off anything. A perfect example of that is like Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo Alvarez. You go watch that fight. Alvarez had a brilliant game plan. He's like, look, I'm facing a southpaw. My jab's not gonna line up that easy anyways. And I'm facing a counter puncher. I don't want to give him anything to key off of, so I'm not going to throw my jab as much. And I'm just going to counter him with left hooks to the body every time, because he likes to pivot out to the right. It's a brilliant game plan against a very specific opponent. Roy Jones used to do that a lot. Used to not use his jab, so his opponents couldn't counter off his lead hand, and it was effective at times. But he didn't do it for every fight. Okay, and the same thing with Canelo. He didn't not utilize his jab in every fight. it was just picked at certain stylistic matchups to where he would do that. But when I see Kambosos, it's like every fight I watch him, especially recently, he's not utilizing his jab. And it's very unfortunate because he's pretty effective with it. He has one, and he tends to be very successful when he uses his jab. So I think that's going to be a big problem for him in this fight, especially against a guy like Teófimo López. And you just saw Teófimo off the Lomachenko fight. He was spectacular. A lot of the questions that we had for Teófimo after the Nakatani fight were kind of dispelled after that fight with Lomachenko. And what he did against one of the pound-for-pound best fighters, it was mind-blowing. You know, a lot of people were criticizing Teófimo López's footwork, saying he doesn't have great footwork or he doesn't have a high ring IQ. I don't know how you beat Vasily Lomachenko with a low ring IQ and little to no footwork. I think what people tend to mistaken with Teófimo is that this is my concern with him, not so much that he lacks those things, it's that he relies so much on his athleticism, okay, his explosiveness and power. Because when I watch Teófimo, he's almost like a cross between Floyd Mayweather Jr. stylistically with that Philly shell and that shoulder roll, but the athleticism and explosiveness and power of Roy Jones to a certain extent. He's like a mix between those two. And you notice on the back end of Roy Jones's career, you know, he relied too much on those things. Okay, he relied too much on those things like power, or his athleticism, and he kind of faded out. And then you look at one of his peers in Bernard Hopkins, who he beat early on. Bernard Hopkins, yes, he lost to Roy Jones, but ultimately he kind of had the last laugh on the back end of his career, beating higher ranked opponents. And yeah, he had a tough last fight with Joe Smith, but before that, he was very successful on the back end of his career. It was amazing. It was because he relied more so on the fundamentals, proper technique, and he understood how to fight strategically. Wasn't the most powerful puncher, but he understood how to fight, very calculated, and he had a high ring IQ, and he developed that throughout the back end of his career. So that would be my concern with Teófimo. I don't want to see him rely too much on his God-given abilities. In this sport, your blessings can be your curses, or vice versa. Your curses can be your blessings. A peer to Teófimo is Devin Haney, right? I can see that similar narrative play out. Here you got Teófimo, very gifted, you know, very athletic, very explosive, and so is Devin Haney to a certain extent, but he doesn't have the gift of power like Teófimo López. And for Devin Haney, I think he would get beat by Teo at this point, but who knows, maybe in the future he keeps on developing. Because he can't rely on that one-punch KO power, maybe he develops his ring IQ better. Maybe he constantly has to go through those 12-round fights over and over again, and his IQ develops and goes higher, right? And he learns how to fight strategically, and he gains a lot of experience and relies upon his ring IQ and his technique, and eventually has a better back-end career, even if he loses to Teófimo. So for this fight, I want to see Teófimo really work on some of his fundamentals, and I want to see him polish up some things in his game, because he's damn near mastered his style. Okay, I want to see also Teófimo work on some new things. Maybe go to southpaw, maybe work on that a little bit, right? This is a perfect fight to do that with George Kambosos. I think Kambosos, especially not utilizing a jab, it takes him a notch below Teófimo, maybe multiple notches. So this is a great fight before Teófimo starts getting into killer's row and going up in weight class and facing great opposition, to really develop some of the fundamentals, his ring IQ, and being disciplined, and, you know, not so much relying on that athleticism. Use it, right? But use it towards, you know, the fundamentals and your technique, and be properly in being a technician, because we also saw that with Prince Naseem Ahmed, very gifted fighter, very similar in a lot of ways in terms of his explosiveness, power, and athleticism as Teófimo López. And when he got up to Barrera, he got up in better competition, you know, like a guy against Barrera, he got exposed. You know, Teófimo's not going to be able to rely on those things as he goes up in weight and he faces really good guys. You can't sit on the outside and jump from outside range to inside range to land those big leaping left hooks like Roy Jones. You can't do that forever, okay? And it's a matter of time before you face somebody who's going to know how to key on those things and box you. So this is a perfect fight for Teófimo to go in and really, really be disciplined and work on some things for future reference. I want to see Teófimo López come out like he did with the Lomachenko fight. He was freaking locked in. He established his jab right off the get-go. He worked down to the body with his right cross and left hook, broke down Lomachenko. And that's what I would like to see him do for the first 4 rounds against Kambosos. And then when he gets control of the fight, that's when I would like to see him work on this one aspect of his game that I haven't seen enough of. I've seen spurts of it, and he's looked phenomenal, okay, when he has shown his ability to fight on the inside, especially with that shoulder roll. But I would like to see him work in the pocket around rounds 4 to 6, really work his inside game, okay, and working that Philly shell, catch and shoot, you know, and counter. And one guy he probably should be studying is James Toney. We always think about Floyd Mayweather for the Philly shell, and he can fight on the inside too. But if you really want to watch a master of fighting in the pocket with that Philly shell, go watch James Toney. He's perfect. He's perfect for that. You can fight James Toney in a phone booth. You wouldn't be able to touch him, and he would get off offensively and counter you. And I want to see some stuff like that from Teófimo López. And if he can get that inside fighting correct, dude, he's pretty much mastered his style, and he can kind of move on to other things and develop in other ways, maybe incorporating a little bit of southpaw, maybe changing his guards in different ways and fighting in a different way stylistically. I talked last week about Sean Porter, how he's a man of many trades but a master of nothing, and part of that is because I do not believe he has the ability, okay, to be that type of fighter. And on top of that, he has mastered nothing for him to start branching off in so many different areas. But Teófimo López is that guy. He can be that guy to where he can be a man of many trades because he's almost mastered one style, but he needs to work on that inside fighting before he can move forward. And, you know, that's what I want to see from Teo. Unfortunately, this is a bad blood fight. I have a feeling Teo is going to go for the kill and the knockout early, which can be a missed opportunity. It's going to be fun for the fans, but I think for him personally, it will be a missed opportunity in kind of developing himself for future fights. So I think the knockout can come anywhere from rounds 1 to 8. If it gets past rounds 8, I'll give Kambosos the benefit of the doubt. I think he'll be able to make it out of the fight alive. Kambosos is a dog. He is game, okay? But for me, I think this is either gonna be a TKO or a knockout, specifically from rounds 4 to 8, right? But I think the knockout can come anywhere from rounds 1 to 8. But I'm going to target the 4 to 8 round range. If Teo's smart, he plays with his food a little bit. He works on some of his stuff, okay? And he works some of his inside fighting or maybe something new stylistically. And then he goes for the kill, finish. Get control of the fight, play with your food, do some new things, and then go for the KO. Now, for Kambosos, if he does so happen to come out with a jab, then that can change the dynamics of the fight. I really do. I think that if Kambosos utilizes a jab in variation, okay, I think it can drastically change this fight and make it more competitive. I still don't think he'll come out with the W, but I think it will make it a lot better, okay? But I don't think he is. I think he's gonna do what he always does. He's gonna be patient. He's gonna wait the counter, which is unfortunate. He has some good pop in his punches. When he does counter, he's a hooker, okay? He loves the hook. He has some good speed and punches and bunches when he counters with his hooks, but unfortunately he slaps a lot of those hooks, and he probably does that to get more speed out of his punches. Understandable. He does a little cross step with his rear leg because he fights at a hard angle, like I told you before, almost like a Philly shell guard, and his footwork's very angled off. And when he's trying to move laterally, what happens is he'll take a rear step, he'll take a cross step with his rear leg, which puts him in position to be off balance. Okay, and that's something that Teófimo can expose. I think one big punch you need to look out for from Teófimo in this fight is the leaping lead left hook, the Roy Jones-esque leaping left hook from Teófimo López, and he could catch Kambosos with that, especially if he catches him in the process of doing that cross step. Another thing is Kambosos is very lead foot heavy as well, which is okay, but your style's got to make sense to do that, right? Like Julio Cesar Chavez, he was lead foot heavy, but at the same time, he's a pressure fighter. He's cutting off the ring. He brought his right hand closer. It just all made sense stylistically. With Kambosos, it doesn't really make sense that he's lead foot heavy, but he fights at a hard angle, and he doesn't lean most of his weight on his back foot. If you're gonna fight at a hard angle like that, you probably wanna lean back a little bit more so you have more time to react defensively. And so that's going to be another thing with the guy with Teófimo having the reflexes he has. He's going to be able to expose Kambosos defensively, especially if he's putting a lot of weight on that lead foot. It's going to be hard for Kambosos to react defensively. But Kambosos does have an interesting little rhythm. It's a little herky-jerky. I like guys who have kind of offbeat rhythm because it's not predictable. It's something that most fighters don't see. So that's not a terrible thing. But I just don't see how he's going to get into rhythm in this fight. I think he's going to be a step behind. If Teófimo's very disciplined and he doesn't fight too emotionally, I think he will have his way with Kambosos any way he wants. And it's just a matter of time when he wants to get that KO. But I would say this, if it goes past round 8, there's a good chance Kambosos can make it out alive and take it to the scorecard. But he doesn't seem active enough to me to beat Teófimo on the scorecards. He doesn't use his jab to set anything up. You got to be able to utilize that jab, man. So I would say the strategy for Kambosos, if I'm in his corner, if I'm Kambosos, I'm telling him, hey, use your jab. Use it. Mix it up. If you, I get you want to counter, but you're going to have to, you can be patient with that, but you also have to be proactive. You know, you have to work. You know, you have to, set things up. And sometimes use that jab to bait your opponent in. Don't just sit there and wait and take a picture and, hope that your opponent's going to throw a punch. Use that jab to suck your opponent in, just like Terrence Crawford did with Sean Porter. Threw out that jab, baited Sean Porter in, and then you would counter. You love the counter punch, but you got to be creative in what you create those opportunities. So if I'm Kambosos, it's like utilize that jab more. And here's the one thing I would say. Your money punch is going to be that right uppercut. Kambosos has a pretty damn good right uppercut, very powerful. I've seen him throw it at times very sharp. He's very sneaky with it. And the times I've seen him land it is when he comes behind a jab, a double jab at that. So my thing is just like, look, shoot your jab, establish your distance, look to land that uppercut, and then at times you can pull back and sit back and wait to counter. But you got to utilize your jab, and that will give him a puncher's chance to keep him in the fight or even win or maybe land a big combination. Now, honestly, if I could take that guy, if I was training Kambosos, I would completely change everything up with him. I would square him up a little bit more instead of putting out an angle. I would pick up his lead hand. I would make him use a jab more. I would make him more of a pressure fighter, like strictly a pressure fighter in terms of cutting off the ring and staying in front of his opponent's face. And I mean, he has beautiful counters with his hooks, but I don't think he gives himself enough opportunities or creates enough opportunities with proactive offense to even land those. He kind of sit backs and he just waits and waits and waits. And I think that's going to be a huge issue with Teófimo López. So I got Teófimo López by KO or TKO anywhere from rounds 4 to 8, but don't be shocked if it comes anywhere from if it happens in rounds 1 through 4. It would not shock me at all. But that's how I see the fight. That's how I see it going down. I will do a post-fight video talking a little bit more about each fighter. This is your boy Havoc with Final Round. Enjoy the night. Be safe.